I believe that the Africa Climate Summit strengthens Africa's position on climate action at a global stage.
The key point of the African Climate Summit was basically defined to develop a paradigm that is based on a fair, equitable, ecological just, and then inclusion transition to low carbon, climate resilient, and economic development pathway.
So I do believe that these convenings are important. We have never ever as humanity faced such a massive crisis, but we also have an amazing opportunity to unite and solve it.
I believe that the Africa Climate Summit strengthens Africa's position on climate action at a global stage. It brought all of us together to speak as one voice. It emphasized the need for fair and inclusive transitions to low carbon, climate resilient economies. There should not be a trade-off between achieving our development goals and becoming climate resilient. And so it encouraged the implementation of national climate strategies to attract significant climate investments and partnerships. The African Development Bank, for example, estimates that for us to achieve universal access to electricity in Africa by 2030, it will require an annual investment of $32 billion. So the summit was able to highlight the potential on the continent in renewable energy and green industrialization, which will allow us to achieve our goals for development, but to do so in a climate-compatible way.
So the African Climate Summit was basically to give a broad background, was to help to strengthen African position for the in terms of the global the global action for the emission to be able to reduce the emission of the emission, and also to find a way to adapt based on the climate change impact. So so the key point of the African Climate Summit was basically defined to develop a paradigm that is based on a fair, equitable, ecological just, and then inclusion transition to low carbon, climate resilient, and economic development pathway. This coupled with some kind of affordable, and then to be able to scale our economy in Africa. And then it was a platform also to encourage the acceleration toward the implementation of the national determined contribution that they call the NDCs that our countries basically report yearly, and then also the long-term low emission development, as well as the climate resilience strategy. And also it was another a platform that allowed also to develop what they call the African Union Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy, an action plan from that was built from 2022 to 2032. And then it's also a platform that are allowed to release what they call the Pan-Africa Initiative, such as the Climate for Development in Africa Initiative. So, and then it was also a platform to also understand how African how we can develop in terms of fund to invest more in the context of the climate action, and then also to be able to also implement African climate agenda. So this was basically the main point, key point of the Africa Climate Summit 2023.
So I think one of the strategic outcomes and wins was, for the first time in 28 years, most of the countries agreed to move away from fossil fuels. But I think the fact that it took us 28 years to get to this consensus highlights some of the points and the struggles that we have when we convene at an international level. But I think it is important. The fact there was some debate about moving away completely or phasing out. However, from an African perspective, especially a country like South Africa that relies so much on fossil fuels for power generation, it is important to understand that it's very difficult for us to just move completely away, and that a more just transition would be required. And I think that was really important, a takeaway from that. So I think one of the biggest challenges is that very often, because of the technicalities and the high level that is needed to transition, very often these convenings are happening and taking place at a very high level, which the average South African or average African person might not understand what that means. And I think it's very difficult, because in order for us to successfully combat this massive issue, we all need to move together. And it's very difficult for people like myself to go on this journey if we don't fully understand what all of this means. I think because of being so science-based, we've got a lot of very intelligent people driving these narratives. But what almost always happens is that we bring in acronyms and really high-tech conversations that are not really relatable for people to action, when very often the solution is actually a lot more simpler than what it is maybe deemed to be. So I do believe that these convenings are important. We have never ever as humanity faced such a massive crisis, but we also have an amazing opportunity to unite and solve it. But I find very often that whilst these treaties and negotiations and all these convenings are really, really important for us to get to the solution, I think that we need to work better on creating more awareness on what some of these solutions are, and how and a narrative that is maybe a little bit more understanding for the masses, because it is something that's going to require us to unite and to do it together.